Hello world, today we're working on a Dodge Dakota. So you're going to have two 10mm bolts holding the fan shroud. And here are the special tools for the fan clutch. You're going to use one in the front and one behind the other, and then we're going to loosen it. So as you see right here, one tool goes into the holes of the pulley, and the other one is used to break it loose. Now this can be a little bit tedious, so just be patient with it. And it might take a little bit of force here and there. But once you have it off, you can start removing this guy. And you can take off the shroud with the fan clutch. But let me get that hose out of the way. So it comes out pretty easily. Once you have that, there's the tension on the belt, so we can take that off. And see that wobble right there? That's what we don't want, obviously. That's why we're having this issue of leaking coolant, since it messes up the seal in the shaft. So we're going to go ahead and replace it. Also make note of the routing of the serpentine belt. Sometimes it's on the vehicle, sometimes it's not. So make sure to take your pictures, as I always say it. Now I'm going to take this pulley off because it's going to be in the way. Now this pulley covers one or two of the bolts that hold the water pump, so definitely need to get it out of the way. Go. Now I'm going to start loosening some of the bolts, not all of them, but this one is for the bypass hose on the right side. There's going to be a seal there, a rubber O-ring that you're going to want to replace as well. And that one doesn't reach. Trying to get all the ones I can reach with the stubby socket. After that I have to go get an extended socket. I don't recall exactly how many bolts, but if I remember correctly, I do try to show you how many there are in total, so you at least get an idea. Now most of the bolts are out. Now as far as the bolts, you do want to keep them a certain way because they are not the same length. So what I do as I take them out, I stick them on the new water pump in the same holes, only because every bolt is just about a different length. They're not the same like most other vehicles, which is kind of interesting but fun in its own way. So you don't want to stick one of the short ones where you need a long one and one of the long ones where you really need a short one. So that's how I do it. A lot of people use cardboard and stick holes in it, make a drawing. I just use the new water pump and let them sit there while I continue working. Now that hose is off, make sure you have some thing underneath to collect the coolant, as you don't want to spill any. This hose by far is the most tedious one. If you don't have these hose clamp pliers, it might make things just a little bit difficult. And when you're trying to separate it from the water pump, I don't recommend using a screwdriver, at least not with a lot of force. I use it since I know how to finesse it enough to not give me that many problems, or at least damage the hose, but it's still, I think that's the most tedious process when it comes to removing the pump. And that's out. Now what I did here was I decided to use the wire wheel just to clean up all this old gasket material. If you do this, you don't want to go too hard, as the aluminum surface will, get scuffed by the wire wheel. So you want to go as light as possible and remove the material. Typically, I would use a blade, but the blade is so tedious, and with the amount of space or the angle at which you're working at, it makes it pretty tiring. So eventually all this will get cleared up. Make sure you definitely clean this, as you don't want any of that stuff going in there. Here's where that seal is gonna go. Looks like the old one is all crusty. So sure enough, when I tried to take it off, it broke, since it's so brittle. As far as the gasket, I use that adhesive to hold it in place. That way it doesn't move when I'm trying to sit it down or set it on the aluminum surface, or the opposite aluminum surface. Here's that clamp with that annoying hose. Now if you can find some sort of lubricant that won't damage the hose, then it makes things a lot easier, but here you can move this and kind of push it in. Now if this hose is brittle, I recommend replacing it now, because it's the most opportune time to do so. All you would have to do is remove the alternator bracket and the AC compressor bracket. So those two would just get moved to the side, and the bracket in the front will get removed in order to access that hose. Alright, now that that's in there, all the bolts are going to go in there. Try to clean them, since a lot of the threads are going to have some sort of old gasket material or just dirt on them, depending on where the vehicle has been. I know it gets a little bit more complicated with the East Coast cars with all the rust, so that's always fun. Ooh, I felt that one. It's not the strongest tool, but when it snaps, it snaps.